Try it. I don't think it would. So I think maybe what we did was don't take anything yet because it really does work. We haven't tried to do it though for 50 years.
No.
Look at that. Oh, I'm well built. Look at that.
Yeah.
It has just held up.
Did you get it to work?
Yeah.
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 Oh,
but I couldn't run as fast as it needed me to.
Here comes the other. Well, this is fun. Oh, we have a guest book. Oh. And you must be Loma.
Yes.
And
I'm her daughter, Paula.
your daughter, Paula. Okay. Well, what we'll do is we'll let you look around for just a minute, and then we're going to set you back in our parlor so we can visit.
All right. Well, I was the first one that had a baby in here.
You were?
Oh, were you the one?
The first one?
Oh my word!
Hey, Hank was born here. First one, and this little Abbott girl was born. But there was two of us.
And you know Judge Walker's sister?
Yes, I know.
Now, do you know Loma? This is Loma, Barnum, Arnold.
Well, you look familiar. Well, I hope so. And I bet you that you was raised up here when I was raised up here.
May I ask you how old you are?
I'm 85.
I'm 84.
Okay, so we had to go to school together or something.
Now, I went to school with an Abbott. My school teacher was an Abbott, and she had eyes in the back of her head.
Yeah.
That would have been Emma Abbott, huh?
Yeah. She did. She had eyes in the back of her head. I knew him when I was a girl.
Sure.
Yeah.
He's the one with the guitar.
Yeah. You know, I mean, you forget all the old timers until you know, when they mentioned your name, I said, you know, I might got to know.
I wrote it down, I said, do you remember? And she says, they sound familiar, that I don't place it.
Well, that's
True,
true.
the Barnums.
Loma's
All the
a different
Jensens.
name.
See, my mom and dad's was John and Christina Jensen.
Oh, yeah.
And Mama was the oldest of Mary Jane and
Let's see.
and
Let's see.
Oh.
Did you have a sister? Myrtle?
Myrtle's my oldest sister.
Yeah.
That's what I was thinking.
One for me.
Yeah. Yvonne was my oldest brother.
Yeah.
Well,
We might have to
Gussie
slide
and
down.
Eldest.
We lived next door to
Art,
John and Don and Donna.
Lee.
Lee.
Maud Lee and Hanley.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then others was Norma or
no, see, this is Carol, this is Dorothy. So
Margaret
I
and
had
Art
two.
and Leora.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
And then I, no, see.
Yeah, she and my mom were they're really, really good friends. Yeah.
We grew up together, all of us on that one street. Used to go down the pasture.
At least that was named there. Okay, see, we can't receive, and this,
Mom and Daddy had a big pasture down between Mott's and our place.
Yeah.
And that was our old ground.
I used to go down and run down the wash.
Okay, and they got her.
Down the wash.
No,
Yeah.
this is when Abbott.
There's 15 down there too.
Probably together. And you just
Yeah, we
remember.
probably together, but it was smaller.
I would have been.
I can't remember if I was barefoot or not, but it sounded like fun.
Yeah, we was always barefoot.
Yeah.
You know, as soon as we get home from school, off we'd go our shoes.
Yeah.
Because we only had one pair of shoes a
That's
year.
right. That's right.
And take
And
good
if
care
you
of
didn't,
them.
if you got your Sunday go to meeting shoes
Oh,
messed
yeah,
up,
oh,
you
this
had
is
to
the
go
right
barefoot.
word.
Yeah.
Oh, I see. Okay.
Those are good old days.
Yeah,
Praise the Lord.
And we didn't know any different. We was happy.
Well, that's it. Everybody was poor and no one knew the difference, you know?
Everyone was in about the same shape.
Yeah.
We used to borrow from back and forth yeast and flour and sugar and
Yeah.
I thought it just was, I was looking at them.
One thing I remember though is my dad, Grandma had the cistern in the back, in the yard, not in the backyard, it was next to the house. And he'd have to climb down and clean it, it was
We needed
then
to.
clean it out.
It's in order,
Take
according
your
to
dad and water it back and fill it up.
Yeah, we did too.
Yeah.
And the
Yeah,
rest
we had two
Good
sisters.
water. Oh, yeah, it was made out of stone.
Yeah, we made, Daddy had one with the good water that Beaver Dam, and then we had one that we get from the ditch. That's where we use that for washing.
We had a ditch run right in front of the house, was a ditch running right in front of the house, but we had good beaver dam water to drink.
Do you want me to go hurry him up?
Yeah, that was,
I could do that
good
for
old
you.
days.
Everybody here, bright-eyed and bushy-tailed,
So
right?
now,
I don't know,
Right,
we've been,
yeah.
we just come back from Laverca in Utah. It was so cold up there,
I know.
and I was losing my voice, it was so cold.
I was talking to my family this morning in Salt Lake and it was snowing.
Yeah, snowing.
Lightly, but you know, it was
Yeah.
snowing.
We're all glad to have you in this parlor. We've made this so we can visit like this and make believe we're back in history. So for the purposes of our historical moment, we'd like to start by having each of you just tell us who you are, introduce your, and maybe the family you come from. And you can do it too.
I'm just here with her.
Well, but
It's
you
okay, I want you anyway.
But, okay.
So there's the neighbor down the street.
That's right.
everybody go first.
Okay, my name's Paula Simmons, and this is my mother Loma, and I'm just here to listen to everybody, and my memories are a little bit of when I was really little.
Good.
So you'll share some of those. When were you little?
Well,
Don't tell how old you are.
And I'm Vivian Packer. I grew up in Mesquite. And I have a sister sitting right over there that we grew up together. A lot of people thought we were twins, but I'm a year and a half older.
I'm Loma, and I went to school here. I went to the 5th grade. And that was during the Depression, of course. And nobody worked. Nobody had a job.
Yeah.
And it was just, but we moved to Vegas when I was in the 6th grade. And I was so smart that I went past the 6th grade, went into the 7th grade. So Mesquite school was better than Vegas.
Good. That's good to know.
That's good.
And I'm Verleen Bay. I live in Las Vegas now, but was born here in the house that I grew up in. And Vivian, she got to have a doctor deliver her
In St. George.
In St. George, but anyway,
Who your
so
mom and
I
dad
was
was.
born here.
Tell them who your mother and dad were.
And Ernest Walker and Julia Rubber Walker were my parents.
And your grandparents.
Grandparents was Sammy and Mary Jane Ince Rubber, Sammy Rubber, Mary Jane Ince.
And Sister Reber was my grandmother's best friend.
Is that right?
They were like this.
And who was your grandmother?
Luna Levitt.
Okay.
Luna Adida Levitt. And they lived on the, not the Abbott Wash, on the other wash.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I did something, I hurt myself somehow, I can't remember, I was just a little kid. But in the little house, that's where that car, places where they sell cars now, it's right at the house.
Yeah.
Maybe that's where we lived.
Oh, you did? The Barnums that lived there?
Yeah,
Yeah.
Barnum stays, Barnum.
Yeah.
And so your dad was
Bob Barnum.
Bob Barnum.
Yeah, I said, you have to remember him because of his guitar.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So-
he always played the guitar.
So you're the same age as Brady Walker.
Yeah.
You
Yeah. Yeah.
That's a grand,
Oh
grand.
my.
But anyway, Sister River came up and I sat on her lap while she did whatever she did. She put some kind of salve. Something was well known in those days. I think probably it was horse limit or something. But it was something like, something they don't use anymore. Anyway, I got well pretty fast. But she was a doctor. She was a nurse.
It was carbolic.
Carbolic acid.
Carbolic salve, and it was
Yes.
mixed with Vaseline and
Yeah.
stuff.
Yeah, it was brown.
Brown.
And your name?
You're next.
Me?
Yeah.
Well, I'm Boudel Bundy. I was born and raised here in Mesquite, and I had my first child here. My first baby was born here.
Right in this
In
hospital.
this hospital,
Oh, my.
Gloria K. And my mom and dad were Christina and John Jensen. Christina Abbott, William E. Abbott's daughter, oldest daughter, from Mesquite. And my dad was John Jensen. Lived up the river up there to the Johnson Ranch. And came from a family of 14 children. And I have 7 children of my own. I lived to Bunkerville, Nevada. Went to school here all my life. Graduated out of high school.
And they grew the best melons in the whole world.
And my boy went through Bundy melons, and my boy still goes Bundy melons down at the ranch, down at Riverside. So, okay.
Me? I'm Voris Bennion, and I was born and raised in Holden, Utah. My parents was Vorda A. McKee and Nettie Elizabeth Hunter McKee. And I was come from a family of 9 children. And I lived in Holden all my life, and when I married my childhood sweetheart, we moved to Salt Lake, lived in Salt Lake area, the Murray area for years. Then in 1973, I moved here to Bunkerville. And I've been here ever since 1973, so I feel like I'm an
Wow, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
The next question we'd like to just share, as Loma did, some school memories. So just, as you decide, share some school memories. We can start anywhere.
Speak up.
I just remember our mother being ill when I was in 5th grade, and in 6th grade, my sister and I would take turn every other day staying out of school to help take care of her. And sadly enough, those are my memories.
That's all right.
Well, actually, when Mom got sick, I remember being in the 1st grade. But Vivian just sort of had to grub up overnight and take over her spot, you know. And it was fun. Looking back on some of the things that we did, you know, we'd have to fix some supper or something, and we didn't know much what to fix as children. But then we'd laugh about it as we said a blessing on it.
Wondering how the Lord bless that.
No,
These are these-
yeah.
But on the other hand, He takes the curse off it.
But yeah, I remember I was in 1st grade, I think, when Mom first became ill. And like I say, because I was the youngest in the family, I was the baby of the family, and I still am the baby of the family, and I still act like that sometimes. I look to Vivian to go ahead, take charge, you know. But anyway, yes. I remember one time when I was in elementary school, and the high school brought an operetta over and performed it on this stage in the old school building up there. And my brother Brent was an Indian in it. And as a little child sitting there looking at him, and he was dressed in that paraphernalia, and his skin was darkened and everything. I mean, I thought he really had turned into an Indian, because I was just little, and it was kind of scary to see your brother up there, and he was an Indian. And I remember that.
That was fun. That was fun. I remember meal Hardy, well, not Hardy.
Yeah.
Carmelia.
Carmelia.
I mean, Carmelia Hardy was my aunt, but, what's
Hughes?
Hughes?
Carmelia Hughes.
Yes, she and I were in the same grade, in the 1st grade.
I was with you.
And okay, and they were giving us cotton oil, remember? And she and I went out, so we ran away. We wouldn't let the school. Well, we lived right across the street in that rock house, right? That we just ran away. We weren't going to take that stuff. Well, my grandmother took me by the little hand and took me right back to school.
In those days, we had before we went into the schoolhouse, we had to line up and take that cod liver oil.
Yeah.
My goodness.
It was a protection for our health or something.
Yeah, sure it was.
Well, I remember them talking about that. I never did have to say anything, but I remember them talking about it. So some kids did, even when we were older.
Give us big tables full of that every morning.
Yeah, yeah.
That wasn't part of ours.
Yeah, it was terrible.
Yeah, I was good in your class. I was in your class.
I had a thought and I forgot about it, so I'll have to come back to me when we got to school.
Another question is, what did you do for fun when you were growing up?
Well, you know, I always played. I thought I was a sportsman. I always played ball, and I can remember I was the first baseman I played the first base position from the time I was in grade school till I graduated out of high school.
Is that right?
And Camilla Hughes was a pitch, and Betty Hardy was the catch. Lisa Levitt was first, second base or something. We went through all our years, 12 whole years with the same position. And
Wow.
we could beat.
That's a record, isn't it?
Yeah, and we beat the boys.
Yeah.
When I read Leonard Rivers, our principal, and he said, one day he said, I challenged the St. George boys for you girls to come and play baseball up there. No, they just laughed. They thought that was very funny. We went up there and beat the tar out of them. It was funny. It tickled them.
Oh, gosh.
And
When we had recess, I remember we always played jacks.
Oh,
We had a
yeah.
great big
Oh, yeah.
hallway, a wooden floor, and we would sit out there during our recess time and play jacks. So much fun. We would also play hopscotch, and we would have to draw the hopscotch, what do you call it, in the dirt, and then we would find a piece of broken glass, and it was really fun if you found a real bright green or bright blue or bright red piece of glass, and that was your top. And so that's what you always played, and of course jump rope and double dutch and those kinds of things. And the boys always played marbles.
We girls played marbles.
Yeah,
Boys.
yeah.
Didn't you have jacks?
We
Yeah,
did.
Yeah,
play
that's what I say, we
really,
would play
yeah.
jacks.
But they were real, they were made out of metal, they were not
Yeah.
just plastic.
The real nice ones.
That's
Yeah, and you could pick all 10 up at a
that
time.
street that was running up between the high school and the grade school,
All right.
that was loaded with kids playing hopscotch and jacks, and
Yeah.
the boys was out there.
Got a
playing
lot of
golf,
good
and
exercise
that was
out in the
playground.
fresh air.
And your play, you had to go build what you were going to do. If we wanted to play house, we would build
Oh,
a little
because,
house some way.
because our dad gathered rocks from the mountain, and he had them stacked all around.
So we'd lay them side by side and divide the rooms, and it'd take you a couple hours to build it. You'd play for a little while, and then you were done. But we always would play we'd go visiting each other, and we'd always say, well, I've got bread in the oven, so I've really got to get back. It's nice to see. That was always the way we did it.
And paper dolls, we
Yeah,
cut our own
paper
paper dolls out of
paper dolls.
Catalogs.
Yeah.
There's catalogs.
Was a good fun.
Then we'd use Mom's Relief Society magazine to put them in different sections in it. Keep them so that they
Well, even when my kids were little though, they did paper dolls and cut things out of the magazines and stuff like that. They still, that was part of the fun of being little,
I know.
Yeah.
Preparing all those things.
I don't think they do that anymore, do they?
No, they don't.
Kids do
No,
that.
you gotta have,
We used to
you gotta have
You buy them.
you gotta have a phone
cut
and
our
a
bags, our
and a
series roll, but
TV. You can't do things like that anymore.
And we used to take our old skates and we would take them apart, and then we would hammer on the back of a 2x4.
So we would just, they were in half.
Uh-huh.
So you had two wheels.
So 2 wheels, you had the
Yeah.
front
So
and the
you had
back.
You had a
and-
skateboard.
Yeah, it's a scooter, because we had the little handle, we'd have a rod coming up and a little handle on it, so we made our own scooters. Fun, but half the fun, of course, was building it,
Yeah, yeah.
And when we went to church every Sunday, we didn't have cars, very many. We had maybe Model T Ford, like that. Daddy had a little Ford, but Barnum, Angie Barnum, and they lived down below us, and he would hook up his horse and wagon and go through town.
That's how we
Time
did
we got up to church, we put that wagon, they're full of little kids. Way out there for orange to
Well, I
pick,
remember
so.
walking with my granddad, where Grandma Levitt and Grandpa Levitt lived, there on the other wash.
Yeah.
Anyway, they walked to church. And we would, if we stayed there, in fact, when we moved to Vegas and we came back, and they walked to church, we still walked to church with them, and that's a long way.
Yeah, that's a long way.
Now it seems like it's a
We
long
used to
way.
have to walk. all
Yeah.
the time to
People,
church.
hardly anybody had cars.
Horse or ride horses. Walk or ride horses.
My dad was a horseman, but we never really learned to ride horses, did we, Vivian?
Well, we did ride horses. I remember herding cows riding a
Oh, do
horse.
you?
Well, we had a mule.
Yeah,
And
donkey.
it was, and a donkey.
I can remember you.
They were just a little smaller than some of the big horses, but I can remember I had gotten on the horse bareback and was riding, how the highway was
Just gravel.
paved, and then there was dirt, and then you had the sidewalk, and of course I was on the dirt riding this horse, and it was galloping along, and here comes cousins. They were coming up to get a load of hay, and so they had their horse and wagon, and they were coming up the street, and as I got close, why that horse stopped dead still. I went right over the head and rolled in that sand. I was so embarrassed. It scared me, knocked the breath out of me, but I jumped up and got back on and just went home.
We used to race horses all the time.
So what did you do for fun when you were growing up?
What did I do? About the same thing they did, which was kind of weird, the same, you know, the jacks, and we still have the metal jacks, and but one of the things I was wanting to ask you guys, when we were little, we would go out in the desert and play house, and we'd get the sage, that was our oatmeal, mesquite beans was our green beans, and then we ate mud pies, and I always talked to my sister to eat and all that stuff while I cooked it. Did you guys?
Oh,
Well,
yeah, we
yeah.
made sandwiches, you know,
Yeah.
a leaf, 2 leaves from cottonwood trees, and then you put the mud that you'd mixed up.
Yeah.
That was your sandwich.
Yeah.
how delicious.
Or you would take a piece of mud and put it on a plate, and then you'd get a yellow leaf and put, that's the yolk, you'd build your egg.
Oh,
And
yeah.
that made the yolk. And we used
Imaginations.
pop bottles for horses, and the China bud trees, whatever they're called, it was a real hard wood, and so we would break those and pound them in and run string to make our corral, you know. And then our horses, which were pop bottles, and then we'd just get some twine and, you know, put a reins around them and make a little manger and get the grass for the food, and you just spent your day. And we'd always take an old tire and cut it out and turn it inside out for your swing. Put it under the cottonwood tree and swing on there. Isn't that fun?
Question here for Voris. When you were going to Las Vegas with your dad with the truck,
My
could you tell
dad,
about that story about the produce truck?
my father owned a great big produce farm in Holden, Utah. And I was just a child, and he made 2 trips to North Las Vegas with fresh vegetables on an old Model T truck. We'd go about 25, 30 miles an hour. That was their speed that they'd go. But he had so much ideas in his head. He was a smart man. He would put a big canvas in the bottom of the truck, and then put a whole bunch. We had an ice house. We had big blocks of ice. He put a whole layer of ice. Then he put straw. Then another piece, a little finer tarp. Then he put the fresh vegetables on top of that, and then just covered that up in the. It was just a refrigerated truck. We made 2 trips to North Las Vegas a week, and I went with him. I was just a child, and I remember him taking me over on the edge of when Hoover Dam was being built, and I watched it being built, and those men on those scaffolds looked about like that, and the trucks at the bottom of where they were working just looked like little teeny things. And it was really fascinating because I first started to see when they started to build that dam. And so that was exciting for me down in this area. So.
And you came through Mesquite, so tell us what you remember coming through
What?
Mesquite. You came through Mesquite. What was it like coming through Mesquite?
From Holden to.
Oh, when I first come through Mesquite, I made the remark, I says, who would ever live in a place like this must have rocks in their head. And here I am, settled in the valley. I must have had rocks in my head. I didn't ever dream I'd ever settle here.
Well, did it have the post office and one grocery store and a cafe, or did it have any of that at all when you were there?
Sure. And I remember when can you remember how the old highway used to come down that road by the high school now? And then it made that sharp turn, and there's a station right there.
Yeah.
I remember that, and I'm afraid we'd just go right through that station when we get to the bottom of the hill. Yeah. So I've seen a big change in Bunkerville and Mesquite too, because I've been here long enough to see the changes. So.
Well, remember that Uncle Jack had the service station around the corner,
Yeah.
around the bad corner.
Yeah.
And the Greyhound bus always stopped there. And one time, of course my dad, they were down there having their little deer and playing the guitar and having a good time. And this guy came through, he's on the bus, he heard my dad singing, and he gave his name address and the whole bit. He wanted to come to California. He wanted to get in the music business. And my grandmother raised Cain. She says, you're not going to go to California. You're not going to leave anybody here and go to California.
Yeah, we didn't have the freeway. We come down the old Highway 95 and then went out through Bunkerville and that up over that.
Yeah, that was the old
Right,
highway.
we went to Vegas.
That was 91.
Right?
Something with
Or
the
91 or whatever it
That was
was.
91.
Yeah.
Something that's exciting to me, you know, the road, like I say, went straight through town, and we lived just over the fence, and there was the highway, but the sheep herders, when they would move their sheep, they would have to travel right on the highway to get through town. Oh, that was so exciting. I mean, it was sheep just from fence to fence, and it was so fun to stand out there and just watch them.
And I got 2 little lambs. My dad went and got 2 little lambs when they came too one time. Well, wasn't that fun? Oh, yeah. I was going to say, you know how you got your mail then? You know, the mailman came by, you had to put your mail in a bag, you put it on the thing and they picked it up. But then when they gave you your mail, they just threw it out of the truck and threw it on the road and you go out and pick it up. Yeah.
Well, my great-grandmother, when she was 12, she was one that pushed a handcart across the plains with the Martin Harris Handcart Company. And that was my great-grandmother, and I remember my great-grandmother, and she'd tell me tales, and the Brigham Young sent a bunch of young men out to rescue them there in Nebraska when they were stranded. My grandmother was down in the wash with a bunch of other little girls, and they were eating bark off the tree, because they was just that hungry. And my great-grandfather, Sidney Teeples, he looked down and he says, that's the little girl I'm going to marry someday. And so when they got settled in Mona, Utah, they had for the young men and women, they had a dance and they got together, and sure enough, they dated, and he married that little girl that was down there that he rescued from the Martin Harris Handcart Company. Yeah. Yeah.
What did you do for parties here? You've talked about the things that you did, you know, playing games and dolls and paper dolls and things like that. Did you have a lot of dances and things like that?
Yeah, we did.
We have more dances now than they used to.
I remember Mabel Mitchell talking one day about having all the dances and
We used to
things.
have lots of dances.
And Bowler,
That's what we had in
Bowler,
Holden. My father was one
he
that
played
had the
She
orchestra
played the
for
piano,
years and
he
years.
played the
He
accordion.
started his orchestra when he was
Yeah, way back.
Yeah, until he was 65.
Because I remember
That
I
was
was real
really
little,
fun,
my
wasn't
dad
it? They
loved
always
to dance.
dance.
And I used to get on his feet, and he taught me how to dance.
Yeah, I can remember when we were little, our mom had said, we go all, and the grown-ups would go to the dances, you know, and then they'd stick their babies underneath the chairs.
Everybody,
And everybody
you
would
and
sleep while they were
everybody.
asleep while they're dancing.
Yeah,
They took their family with them.
yeah, that's what it was, that's what it was about, you know.
But even then, didn't everybody just about have music in their yard? Neighbors would come
yeah.
Oh, yes.
all the time? Wasn't that just all
Always
part of
says
life?
that's the way we were raised.
Yeah.
And make homemade ice cream.
Yeah.
And the kids would play Run Sheepy Run, or draw a big round circle and then put a dot.
Yeah.
Loved getting together.
And my shit.
4th of July was when we had homemade ice cream and watermelon bust.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And somebody would always go up and set dynamite off real early in the
Oh,
morning
yeah.
on 4th of July. And
Yeah.
that would wake you up. They go back up in the hills
Yeah, they did.
and do that.
And then they did New Year's Eve, they'd all go out, and New Year's, on Christmas Eve, they'd all go out in a wagon and to go all over them. Because they came, Vonda Hardy. Anyway, she came, woke my dad up. And, come on, you're gonna go with us. And it wasn't cold, but it was just, anyway, he grabbed his guitar and they took off, and they were with a whole bunch of them out in the wagon.
Yeah, that's how they did.
Christmas
They
carol,
down the
yeah.
wagons.
Can you tell us a little bit about the watermelons and the chickens and the water fights in Bunkerville? Were you part of that?
I've heard about it.
Yeah, we used to have a lot of fights with the
Yeah.
chickens.
Oh, yeah.
Well, actually, one time Dad let, was it the Elders Quorum, that he let them use one of our fields to plant melons. And of course, us and our cousins, we we were anxious to know if they were ripe yet, so we went and cut into one and it wasn't right, so we threw it in the ditch. Try another one, we kept searching for one, and of course, you know, the rinds, they floated down the ditch and Dad caught us. And we had to.
Well, the water hadn't come yet and Dad saw them in there, so he talked to us about it and we had to apologize to them. Which was a good lesson for us to learn.
We used to have watermelon.
Now, do any of you have memories of the nurse who worked here and what she was like?
Yeah, Grandma, or Mrs. Howe was her name.
Bertha.
Bertha Howe.
She was the first nurse, and
I remember
was a
her.
sweetheart. She was the one, a lady that just said what she thought. You know, she liked Grandma, but just kind of, but everyone loved her.
Very stately, very, just a, you know, upbeat person, enthusiastic all the time. I remember that about her.
Sweet. Yeah.
And I remember one time when Mom was not well, and they had brought her, Brady and them had picked her up in Montana, because that's where Vivian lived, and they'd brought her down. And so I came over from Las Vegas to be with her, and she was in there lying on the bed, I mean, you know, wide awake. I mean, her eyes, she couldn't sleep, and I thought I heard the back door. I was washing dishes, but I didn't pay too much attention. When I went into her mom, she wasn't there. So I knew that she had gone out the back door, and so I called my Uncle Ralston and couldn't get him, so I called J.L. Buller down at his store, and some of the men came up to look for her, and it was in the heat of the summer. And she had wandered up into the hillside and just laid down in the shade of a hill there, and they found her. And they went down and got Bertha, and she came up and she gave her some kind of a shot, and it just knocked her out for about 6 hours, which is what she needed, you know, rest and that. But that's just kind of one of the last things I remember about Bertha.
She was a good nurse. Good.
She really was. She was just
beautiful.
a neat lady. And her husband, was it Charles? Was it Charles?
Charles.
Yeah, and he was kind of a good friend of Dad's. Do you remember him coming
Dad
down?
and everybody.
They would go prospecting. They liked to do that together. And so I remember him. And I also remember when we used to go trick-or-treating, we'd knock at everybody's house, you know, and they'd have something for us. And so
But we always had to either say a poem or sing a song or do a dance or something. It wasn't just trick or treat. You know, we had to.
But I remember seeing Charlie, how he was out. He liked to go for walks. He was a really old walker up and down the sidewalks. And so we came, he was walking, and so we went up and trick or treat to him. And so he handed us some dollar bills, and we went to the cafe and got some pop. That was fun. And when we had Valentine's Day.
Oh, my favorite.
The Valentines were so unlike what you have today. You had to order them out of the catalog. But they had a smell. That paper had a smell like no other. Because year after year, I love that. And I'd like to smell it again, because I know I would recognize it.
But it was taking your handful of Valentines and going to the door and putting it down on the doorstep, knock and run and hide.
Yeah, but the ones that some of the boys did it that way. They went and hide already, but
Oh
they
yeah,
had
a
string.
dirt Valentine. You take the most
Yeah.
beautiful one, put string on it, and then you'd run and get at the end of the string and knock, and as they reach down for it, of course, you jerk it and run with it so they couldn't get it. Fun. Yeah.
But we soon caught on and we stepped on it before we
That was
for it.
We'd run and hide and giggle.
Yeah.
Yeah, and our brothers were so tall. Our brothers were like about 15 years older than we were, so we were really little when they were in high school. And they would put us up on the outhouse and just walk down. We'd be up there just screaming because they were tall enough they could stick us up there, and we didn't know how to get down. And they'd go on down to the house, you know, or back to the house, and we'd sit there and scream until they'd come back. Thought it was big fun.
Did your homes have electricity when you first remember?
No.
No electricity.
Oil lamp and
Yep. Bring it out every night and eat around at the
had
table.
cisterns that we drew the water.
And had to go fill them. We'd get down in the cistern, they'd lower us down, and we'd
They'd
sweep
put
it
us in a
out.
bucket, you know, and lower us
The
down
sediment
into
and
it.
everything, you know,
We'd
get
have
all
to
that
sweep
cleaned
it
out.
and get all
Yeah.
that stuff out, and they'd pull it up and threaten to leave us down there, but it's a good thing we had Mom and a Dad.
Since you're all ladies here, we'll forget the men are here. I have a woman's question. With this extreme heat here, we've had a lot of people ask us what you do in the summer to cook. With those old stoves, I know we had a cold stove, and that heat remained forever and forever. And it was bad enough in Salt Lake. I can't imagine cooking and having that hot stove, we have a lot of people here ask us how you dealt with that.
You just did.
How
You
did
just
you?
did it, you didn't know any different,
We
did
didn't have
you?
the air conditioning.
Did you have a summer kitchen?
No.
A lot of people in the
We
south did.
outside lot.
No summer
You know, we
kitchen.
had
No
to-
summer kitchen, the stoves was inside.
And
We'd eat outside
And of course-
a lot after
Oh,
some
yeah,
time.
you could eat outside, sometimes we'd sleep outside.
yeah, we always left outside in the
Well,
summer.
in the south, they have, you know, for the hottest part of the summer, my mother was born in Alabama, they would have what they called a summer kitchen.
Yeah.
And when it got so beastly and humid, they would go out there and cook or do their canning, and the rest of the year they'd cook on the inside. But they didn't have that here. You
Well,
all
they-
have
yeah.
Yes,
we
they
did
did, they
canning
had,
out.
right up there, they had a,
Oh my
We
God.
did our
place.
canning outside.
what was that old
We would
monument up
sit
there by,
outside
as you come over
in
the
the shade.
hill?
And
Yeah, those.
Did
So-
they have a stove there that you could, a community kitchen there?
We
You know
just
where that thing is along the highway,
Yeah, that
by
was,
Fox?
That was a meal.
What was that?
It was a meal.
Because I thought they used that for cooking and that years and years ago, can you
Some
remember?
people might have done it, but
So you
not
did the
us.
same thing for canning. Now, your
Yeah,
canning
the
season.
peddlers would always come through and.
And
You
you
know,
know, you'd be bottling and it
Yeah.
would be blistering
Yeah.
hot and that was still on the
know
inside.
what you
But we
did?
would go outside probably
We
to
did
peel the
number
fruit
three
and
tub.
prepare it, get it
We-
into bottles
We
and
cooked
then
that
just.
with made a, outside.
We've been asked that here.
Number
People.
3 tub,
Yeah.
fill it with water and put your fruit in the water.
Yeah.
People were stronger than they are now, I'll tell you.
I
They are,
agree.
they are.
They were
much-
hard workers.
They were hard workers, they worked their, I remember seeing my mom's hands, I feel so bad, cause she did her washing on the washboard.
With lye soap.
Mhm.
Lye
I
soap.
know.
Yeah,
Homemade.
made, that you made.
Yeah.
Homemade soap.
Yeah, but which they made, that's right.
That's
And
right.
it's just, you know, you can't, but they worked hard.
Okay, we also were curious if you remember anything about the old movie theater in town.
Yes, I do.
Oh, yeah.
I
did with
do.
the first one.
Yes.
And they had a new movie every 2 days, didn't they? Didn't they
Well,
change it?
we didn't have the
Oh,
movie
oh.
house for a long time.
On the weekends, it
We
wasn't.
had it down in the church,
Not Sunday,
in
but-
the old church house. You know, they just
Which
had
was the
a,
schoolhouse,
yeah,
or-
the schoolhouse in the auditorium.
I remember when John Deere would come every year too, and they would bring a movie, and
Yeah.
everybody would go up there and get to watch the movie free, and then
That's
they
where
would
we had it.
do their little
Was
selling
it
and the
Elmer?
tractors.
Elmer.
Oh, that was fun.
But the Elward Theaters were.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Yeah, that was the.
Yeah, that was the old theater, and it was just, my grandma used to take us to that movie, and they'd have a western movie, and you should hear her. She'd get so excited, she'd yell, and she'd. She was so, oh, God.
And they always had a cereal, like either Red Ryder or Nyoka, the
Tarzan,
gentle girl, and it was a series, and so
Yeah.
you'd go every Friday, because the next Friday you wanted to see the continuation.
Yeah,
That was really.
at that time, it probably cost a nickel.
I think it cost 50 cents at one point, because my friend and I, 1 cent, this is really.
We've got a playbill.
Anyway, we would borrow money out of our mom's purses. She would get 50 cents 1 cent from hers, and I would the next. We'd go up, get on the bike and go up and go to the movies.
Oh.
I don't know where I was.
I don't know
I didn't
either.
ever do that.
She was a good girl.
That was fun.
Do you want some water?
No, I don't.
You're okay.
Gotta open it for you.
And we used to trompe. I imagine you had to go out. Did you guys have to
lots
help out and help
of-
trompe?
Yeah.
Oh, I remember when I had
I
milk
had
the
to
cow.
turn-
Yeah.
I thought it would dry up before I finished
Ladies,
it.
oh,
Yeah.
How about that?
We had the milk cows and
Oh
everything.
my goodness, yeah, 20 and 50 cents, yeah.
And Roy Rogers, whenever
Oh, yeah,
his
Roy
were
Rogers.
on,
Oh, yeah.
I had to
Those.
see that. I just thought I would die if I didn't get to see Roy Rogers show. There was one on a Friday night, and I had been sick and stayed home from school that day.
Hey, there's one this Thursday,
And
Friday,
I
the
thought, well, I'll
24th,
just
25th.
act like I'm
You wanna go?
better so I could go
Those
to
were
that
the old
movie.
movies that
Yeah,
used
the
to
old
be.
movies.
Sometimes,
Mom wouldn't let me go.
Together.
Yeah.
And I lived, and so after that, I didn't care whether I'd see him.
I remember all those because my dad owned a movie house
oh my.
when I was growing up.
But
yeah.
we used to go to movies because of who was
free.
Oh,
Wasn't that,
yeah.
wasn't that Elmer Hughes that owned the,
Elmer
Elmer Hughes, yeah.
Uncle Elmer.
What?
on the house.
theater.
That's why they were
That's
called
why it's L
Elwood.
word.
Oh, Elmer.
Uncle Elmer and
Edward or something. yeah.
Pulsfer, Lou Pulsfer.
Okay. And
And
then Mike Burns is, you know,
And then later
Mike took it over, and that's when I remember, yeah.
When you were growing up, did you have the silent movie where the dot would go along and you'd have to read?
No.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, we did that.
Yeah.
But we did have that in the movie house, we had it up in the church.
My father owned a movie house in Holden, and I remember the first talking movie that come on there, and that just was so fascinating.
Oh, yeah.
You know, but they just had the silent movies, and then there'd be a little ball bounce along, and you'd have to read.
Yeah.
Each
As it
word.
said, you know,
Yeah.
silent.
Do you guys remember Uncle Edward Berry
Oh, yeah.
and they owned that little store across
Yes.
there?
Oh, yeah.
Well, we used to get the biggest kick out when they'd go to the movies and they had to read, you know, and she'd read to Uncle Abe and they'd get way up there where the little kids were. All the little kids would surround them because she was reading, you know, for them. And she would read real loud and all those little kids would really enjoy that. They'd go all around her up on the front seats to hear Uncle Red. What a fun his name, Uncle Abe and what is her name? Anyway, it was Abe's Woodbury's wife.
I have another kitchen question. I've read several times in several of the write-ups around here about watermelon molasses. Do y'all know about that?
Molasses candy,
Never heard of it.
or watermelon relish,
Watermelon pickle.
Watermelon pickles.
Molasses. No?
Never heard of that.
I hadn't either. Watermelon
Oh, I don't-
pickles I'm familiar with,
Yeah.
but I wondered how that could be accomplished.
Oh,
I've
molasses,
never heard of that.
molasses you make out of,
Molasses
Sap,
candy, but I don't
yeah.
know.
Molasses
Or
and
sugar.
made out of sugar.
Yeah.
That's what you.
Were there types of wild berries or fruit that were growing back then?
pomegranates.
not here.
Wonderful pomegranates.
Apricots and plums.
Our
They were-
Comby,
they were
melons.
didn't he have a seedless pomegranate? One of his books back here says he developed a seedless pomegranate.
I thought the fruit was the seed.
Some people have never heard of pomegranates.
Oh,
I
wonderful
know.
though. I mean, you just go, they always, you know, grew along ditch banks where they had constant water. And you just pop one off and hit it against the tree and it would break open and
wow.
you'd just devour it. Oh,
But where
so
did they
good.
originally come from, I wonder?
I don't know.
Because that's
But
not-
Grandpa
that's not
never
seeds.
Oh, they
sent
always had them here as
Yeah.
far as I
They
can
always have
remember.
those in great
And
vines.
I'm sure that
Had
they
a lot
had
of-
one long.
Do you remember the great vineyards?
I
Yes.
do, I can
We
remember
need
when I
some people
was,
tell us about those. People do ask us about
They
that.
were sent down by Brigham Young to grow grapes down here, so that could
wasn't
be.
tasted.
but I can remember walking
I
over
used to
my,
go and pick grapes for them.
It's not
Okay.
for, and it wasn't for wine.
my
Yeah, we
grandparents
picked them,
had,
And then we'd get so many for.
you know, just across the street, that's where they lived. And I can remember just as a little girl walking over and seeing a bunch of grapes.
Wow.
And it was just eye level and I just had to have some of those.
And when
Yeah,
did they
just
have then the
warm in
big
the sun, we
freeze
like
or
to-
a frost that killed
Right.
them?
1936.
Yes,
Yeah,
yes,
and that
because
was the
I was
end.
born October that year and they did. And I remember Mom telling me how it
Yes.
had snowed and it was cold.
And they
brought me
lost the
home.
majority of the vines.
Yeah.
And
they
so
did.
they had served a purpose when they were needed and expected to.
We used to sell grapes along the side of the road
And melons.
and melons and we'd hold up grapes for sale.
And the tourists would buy them because that's who went
And
through
we'd
town.
run to the
That's
cars
great.
and- yeah.
That's an excellent idea.
Of course, there wasn't a lot of traffic back then. We used to sit and watch the cars go
That
by.
was at old 91 along there.
We knew the names of all the cars back then too.
Wasn't any cars.
Model Ts and Model As and.
But I remember as an early teenager too, going down to my brothers who lived down the lane, and then we'd walk on down to the river and through all the brush, and there were some wild grape vines, and my thoughts were that they were just sort of left over from when the grapes had been here,
Yes,
because
that's
there was just a few of
possible.
them. We'd go down there and pick them, and that was always
Now,
fun.
what related to Brent Walker?
Yeah, there's
He's our brother.
brother.
Your brother?
Yeah.
I
Ian
worked over
Brady.
for Archie Hughes, and he was a friend of mine, and he raised the best darn pomegranates.
Oh, yeah.
So each year, he'd bring me a bunch of pomegranates, and I'd make him jelly.
Oh, yeah, those tart ones,
Yeah.
huh, they were the
tart
sweet
ones,
ones.
and I
yeah.
used to, he was your brother, huh?
Yeah.
It's a
Pomegranate
nice guy,
juice is the
yeah.
best juice you ever tasted.
Yeah,
Yeah, he was a one.
he'd bring the pomegranate, say, I'd like some jelly, and so I'd
Yeah.
make the jelly and bring over to him.
Yeah.
He furnished the pomegranates, and I made the jelly, split with him.
And they still have them down in Overton, they still have the pomegranate trees there,
Uh-huh.
Oh, yeah.
so you can get them there. And in Bunkerville, they have pomegranates.
And in St. George, I
I have-
understand
St.
they're
George,
quite
do
prevalent.
do they?
And they-
But
I
yeah,
have
oh,
them. I have them.
and so when we come to the coming home party, is that what they call it now? You always have to go get pomegranates.
So
and
that was your
melons.
brother, huh?
Yeah, I came
I was
back
gonna
and,
ask you if you're
I
related
have
to
still
Brent,
have
'cause
one
I knew
with
him
pomegranate
very
too,
well.
so.
yeah,
And
he
so,
did.
yeah, well, Brent had gotten some
Yeah.
thinking they were the sweet ones and they turned out to be the
Yeah.
sour ones, so you've been
They make good jelly.
benefited from
We have a
that.
family tradition.
I used to work
every
over in the-
Thanksgiving. We have
Little market
We have
over there for
pomegranate
Archie
salad.
Hughes.
Oh,
for
yes.
every year.
Yes,
And
that's
it
what
is
you
in
have at
market,
Thanksgiving, it's
and
very
on
much a
short
tradition.
stock. And it's my grandmother,
That's
my
where I
grandmother, you
Got
know.
acquainted with him, and he says,
The more I
do
look
you know
at
how to
the
make
more I can
pomegranate
make.
jelly? And I says, I sure do. And he
The more
says,
I look
my
at you,
first
the more
pomegranates
memories
would
come back.
jelly. So each year he'd bring
I
me
get,
pomegranates,
because I was
I'd
worried
make the
about
jelly,
it,
we'd
because I
split
wouldn't
it.
believe it.
Yeah.
The more
Yeah.
you're talking, it's just like yesterday.
That's what makes it
We
fun.
read the
Well,
book
that was
together.
That was the whole idea,
Yeah.
thank you.
Yeah.
You would be surprised how many people, when they ask what we grow here or grew, and we tell them pomegranates, and they say, what do you do with them?
Yeah.
Of course, my response is pomegranate jelly
Right.
or Dixie salad. And then the next question is, well, what is Dixie salad? Oh,
Yeah.
have to get out a cookbook and show them. We have a little Pioneer cookbook
Oh.
here,
Uh-huh.
and we have to explain to them what a pomegranate or a Dixie salad is. So.
Apples and bananas and.
Yeah,
Nothing like
whipping
it.
cream
Yeah,
and
yeah.
apples.
Nuts, apples.
But we didn't, some people call
Everything.
that a fruit salad, it was pomegranate
It was just
salad.
pomegranate
Yeah.
salad, because
Oh,
you had mostly
pomegranate
pomegranates
salad.
with a little bit of fruit,
Yeah.
other fruit, apples and
Yeah.
sometimes walnuts,
Mhm.
whipping
We
cream.
used to use whipped cream, but now we use Cool Whip.
We still go back to the whipping because we like that the best.
Is there a favorite teacher each of you recall in school?
Oh, in school?
I had one that was
Oh.
Miss Whitmer. I think she lived in Overton, I'm not sure.
Whitmore.
But I had the scarlet fever when I was in second grade, and I missed a lot of school. And she came over every day and brought me something, brought my lessons, she'd bring me an orange or something special. And that's one I can remember. She was so, and I keep it because I know she was from Overton.
Yeah,
Yeah,
from
Whitmore's.
down the valley. Well, Leonard Drebber, and he's an uncle to these girls.
Yeah, he's around.
Leonard Drebber and Erland Tolber was my two very favorite teachers.
Now, Leonard was the one that arranged for the National Youth Administration to help build this structure.
Leonard Drebber.
Yeah.
He was a good teacher.
Did you have Edith Knight? Who had the Edith Knight here?
Oh,
Well, she was one of
Yeah,
the
she-
longest term teachers.
Yeah.
Who had,
She was a good teacher.
She was my
taught
third
all
grade.
of us.
so
second.
pretty much all of you, okay.
Yeah.
Abbott was my
We used
teacher.
to, she was a good teacher too.
Abbott was a good teacher.
Emma, yeah.
But she
Oh,
was,
Emma.
Emma.
she was
She was
so
really
funny.
nice.
She had,
She was
were all
Maureen
strict.
Abbott's
Maureen.
teacher, and Maureen was my fourth
Her mother,
teacher.
yeah.
But I remember the Valentine boxes that they used to make,
Mhm.
and Maureen Abbott had one that looked like a ship, and it was blue and white.
Oh. Who was Maureen's husband?
And,
Pat
Hughes.
Pat
Pat Hughes.
Francis,
still alive.
Francis?
Francis
Hughes.
Yeah,
Yeah, he's still alive.
He came back from the service,
yeah,
and she got married when we were in her class that year. And
All of those ladies were good teachers. Boy, they were just
Yeah.
really. We always said they had eyes in the back of their head.
You all know we have some school records here. Your old school class books and grade books.
Probably got them all.
Shall we
Don't
go
look
get
at our
them?
grades. Don't look at our
We do-
grades.
We don't have them for every year, but we do have
Some.
probably 10 or 15, yes.
How about
So-
some telephone memories, the early telephones?
Oh, there.
One ring,
Yeah.
one dingling.
We never had, we were one of the poorest families in town, I'm sure,
We-
in material things, so I put it that way.
See, our uncle, the Pulsper, Louis Pulsper had the telephone company down the lane. Like, you remember, I was going with my husband, he was in service. And I can remember in the middle of the night he called, of course it was day, night, wherever he was. And he called and they come over and got me and I talked to him on the phone. It was in the middle of the night.
That's what we had to do. There was just one in town at the
Just
time.
that
and then
one phone, yeah.
Well, I remember Uncle Leonard getting one, and we were all out playing his tutters, and I thought, I'm just gonna go in the house when nobody's looking, I'm going to call Brady. Well, Brady lived up in Orem. I thought you just had to pick him up and tell him I want to talk to Brady Walker, and that's what I did. I was just really little, I don't know, 3rd grade or whatever. But I sneaked in when nobody else was looking, and I just picked up the phone, and the operator said, "You know me to help you?" I said, "Yeah, I'd like to talk to Brady Walker." "I'm sorry, there's no one with that name." I didn't know what I was doing.
This is all before the dial.
Now everybody,
Yeah.
now everybody sees
we
that.
had-
No, actually, it was the
Yeah,
dial. It was the
crank
dial
Oh,
for me.
you dialed before you-
Yeah.
It was a crank, sharp,
Crank,
sharp.
Yeah, that was before our
And there were
time.
party lines.
Yeah.
Or
Somebody had to know you were
Switchboard.
ring.
Yeah, we'd have to go ring it along and then it's.
And we had a friend up here that worked Mary Ellen, remember, and she worked at the switchboard.
My
I
past,
don't
you
know,
know.
in the connection.
Very
So I remember going up visiting her when she worked
Yeah.
there. And then my mom used to go downstairs
Ring
from
it
that
and
building
say,
and
"I
candle
want to call
eggs.
so-and-so," and you'd remember
Candling
the
eggs
number
are,
which
you know,
was
you put them on a
coming
light
in.
to see if there's any blood
To see
spots
if
or anything in
there's
them.
Yeah.
We used to go up with her when she would do that.
Times have changed.
Yeah, times change,
Well,
yeah.
as we finish up this, we'd like to just have you each kind of go around and just tell something that's been beneficial to you growing up in this valley. Something you've always enjoyed and cherished growing up here.
Well,
The friendship, the friendship of knowing everyone.
Knowing everyone.
And, you know, and just loving everyone.
Yeah.
You know, and when we were little, we.
Everybody knew everybody.
Just the whole family.
And
just the
thought, in
family.
fact, we're probably all related.
Yeah, yeah, we were, probably. But we had love for one another, and if we ever needed anything, why, we know,
That's
you
it.
know, we just all helped each other.
We had a Uncle Ira, and he damaged his back. I don't know whether it was when he was working on the bridge or
no,
whatever.
he was lifting a head gate out of
Yeah.
the
Out
ditch
of
when
a
he was
ditch.
17 years old.
And he hurt his back, and so he had to use crutches to get around. Uncle Ira.
He worked at the post office, at the courthouse.
Courthouse in Las Vegas, yeah. And so I remember him always, he would drill me on my multiplication and stuff, you know, just wanting you to learn as much as you could. But I remember having to go often with him, like if he was out digging the ditch, cleaning the ditch, and he would always just sit on the ditch bank, you know. And then I was there to hand him whatever he needed, or when I get this. And I remember I used to think, I want to go play. If I could somebody else do this, you know. In fact, I had taken a class one summer, a writing class, and so I just wrote some stories from Mesquite, from my childhood, and one was Uncle Ira that I wrote about, and how looking back, I mean, I know how to use a hammer, I knew how to use a screwdriver because of Uncle Ira, because I had to help him do those things, or at least take the tool to him so that he could. But I've often made the comment, I'm so grateful for the things that I never had as I look back on my life, you know, because we didn't have anything, and yet we had everything. You made your play, you know, you just,
Yeah.
life was wonderful.
Because like
you know.
today, the kids don't appreciate things
They
anymore.
have too much.
They get too much. Yeah.
But the memories, all of the memories that we have of home are so dear to us, and that's what I remember, because you learn to get along with what you have and make do.
The other side of that is everybody in the whole knows what you're doing.
Yes.
Bad or good.
Yes, and that's wonderful, isn't it? You know, you look at,
Yeah,
you look
well,
at the kids now that are so
we do
mischievous and they do
Right.
dastardly things.
Yes.
And yet, you didn't do that. You didn't have that kind, because everyone took care of everybody else. They were all your guardian, your teacher.
There's no respect anymore. That's just.
Well, them days, all of the neighbors took care of your kids and you took care of their kids.
That's right.
It was all one great big family when.
Couldn't get away with anything, could you?
No,
Because somebody
no,
would.
like she
No,
said,
and-
good or bad.
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
And of course, the sports program was always fun here, you know, Loma Virgin Valley. They always had good teams, and it was always fun, wasn't it? And Wappa Valley was our biggest rival.
Still is.
Yeah, they still are.
Always will be.
That's where you
But that's where we live.
You're from the, well, that's good.
Well, do you remember much about coming over here for games and things?
No, the only thing I can remember was Uncle Jack the Most and Aunt Neil Hardy when I was growing up, because my mom's dad, Grandpa, was Aunt Neil's brother. And so we'd come over here a lot, my sister and I would come over here a lot with them. And we just loved it out here, you know, but we'd go over there and Aunt Neil played the piano and Grandpa, and then they would sing together. And Grandpa, if he didn't have his guitar, he'd have his harmonica. You know, and it was just, we grew up with all this music and it was so wonderful. And then I used to love it because Uncle Jack would walk in and he was a real cowboy, you know. I mean, I look out there where all those houses are and I remember that was his fields. And you know, I hate growth, I hate changes.
Yes.
I really do, I'm an old fogey. I really, you know,
Was there a song you enjoyed singing?
oh my gosh.
Oh, let's see.
Home means the
Home means the sage and the pine, out where the Truckee silvery rills, out where the sun always shines. There is the land that I love the best, dearer than eye can see. Right in the heart of the golden west, home means Nevada to me.
Hey, that was great.
Was that part of your school song every time you see it?
We would always sing
Valley does the
often.
same
Yeah.
thing, they were
Well,
growing up too.
I
they
joined the
did.
Eagles Lodge, and we had a drill team. And that song is one of the songs that we marched to. We did all of our little steps too. It was just really, that was my favorite song.
Well, I led the band when I was in the high school. I was a baton whirler. And I loved that. They said I could reach my chin, my knees clear to my chin. I wish I could do that now.
Verleen and I were on the tumbling team.
Oh,
yeah.
Tumble between basketball games.
And Bert White, he was our janitor,
Oh,
and he was
yeah,
our,
he
he's
was
the one
our
that
coach.
took us, and, yeah, our coach.
He was
fun.
in your day, but he was there when my kids were there.
And you know, you think back on, well, like you say, you mentioned, what's your favorite teacher? They were all favorites. Having a small school, a small community, it's been exciting to see the people who have come and gone that have taught us. And of course, Mabel Mitchell was our English teacher. You know, I really feel like I learned a lot from her. You know, she's
Used it a lot in later life.
Yeah, and of course, her husband,
Andrew.
yeah, he was my 5th grade teacher.
Would you believe it? Boudel and I climbed up a tree and had our picture taken. We were in our 80s. We got pictures to prove it too. He took it for us. He's the one that took them. We did. We climbed up this tree in front of Baudel's yard and he took her picture.
Why not?
I used to love it when a hard wind would come and blow down the big cottonwood trees. We had so many cottonwood trees here. I mean, and it was huge. And as a child, it probably wasn't maybe that big. But we would get on a branch and we would just hold on to another one. We'd bounce up and get it moving up and down with us. Oh, it was fun when a tree would blow down. So that was part of our play too.
Or when they chopped.
So fun.
Do you remember the name of the people that lived almost to the river and he probably raised Cain both ways, but he raised Cain. And made molasses.
That was his kids or something.
No, it was.
Wasn't Art somebody else then?
It was somebody else.
Oh,
But they did raise Cain.
yeah, Art raised
Yeah.
the cane.
Yeah, this
I've
is
got,
somebody, he was.
Scarred.
He was
Here.
part in it or
Cain.
something.
Oh, Willard Levitt.
Yeah,
Mm,
Willard
okay,
Lemon, yeah.
okay.
That's who it was, yeah. Yeah, 'cause he had a daughter.
Yeah.
What was her name? I can't remember.
Was it Norma?
I don't know how many
Pauline?
he had. He had Pauline, that was
Eleanor?
my age.
Yeah.
Norma was the older one.
They had a.
My age.
Yeah.
Okay, at this point, we just like to wrap up the preservation part of this. We sure thank you for coming, and that's going to be the end of this interview, but later on you can finish up your visits.
Welcome to sit and visit.